Hello everyone, I am Siddharthan. Today, let's solve the fifth LeetCode problem. I'm in the problems tab of LeetCode site, and you know that we can sort the questions based on the difficulty, right? And I'll start with the easier questions. And we have already solved 4 questions. And the next question that we are going to solve is valid parenthesis. So let's go into this and see how we can solve this particular problem. So given a string is containing just the characters of we have like the parentheses, curly brackets and square brackets, determine if the input string is valid. So now we need to understand what is a valid input string. So that they have mentioned here, open brackets must be closed by the same type of brackets. Open brackets must be closed in the correct order, and every closed bracket has a corresponding open bracket of the same type. So I hope this is clear, right? So you can just see this example to understand this. So if you have this parenthesis, this is like a open parenthesis, right? So it should also be closed by this particular bracket of parenthesis. So you cannot like start with a parenthesis and kind of close it with a square bracket or a curly bracket. So in this case, if you see, this is a valid one. In this case also, it's like closed by like valid parenthesis, and in this one this is not valid. So basically we have to return a boolean value of true or false depending upon whether that particular input string is valid or not. So this is what we are going to solve, and before kind of solving this in Python, let's try to understand the approach. And for this approach, we are going to use an interesting data structure called as stack. So we will be using stack and a dictionary. So if you are working with Python, right, so you probably know like what a dictionary is, which is nothing but a data structure that has this key value pairs. So each of this key as a pair, and along with that we are going to use another data structure called as stack, where the interesting feature or characteristic about this stack is you can only stack the elements on top of the other elements, and you can take only the last element first. If you see this, right, so we have this A, B and C, and C can be added only on top of A and B, right? And it can be added only on the top, and only the top element can be removed from this stack. So you can call this like pushing an element to the stack and popping it out. You can just think about this stack as just stack of plates. So we know that if there is a stack of plates and you want to add more plates to that, you will add only like on top of the other one, right? And you don't want to pull a plate in the middle so that like nothing is getting damaged. So similarly in a stack as well, you kind of take the first element first and then you take like the other elements. So that's how stack works. And again, this is like a very useful data structure in different use cases. And here also we will be using this stack in order to track the opening and closing square brackets, and we will be having a mapping dictionary. So first I'll explain you the approach that we will be taking. So here let's say that again in Python we know that we don't have like explicit data type as stack, just like you know, list or a dictionary. We don't have stack, but using list we can simulate something that's similar to stack. So let's say that we have this empty stack that we will be initiating, and we will also be initiating, or we rather will be creating a mapping dictionary. So I'll call this as mapping dictionary, and this will have like opening and closing square brackets. So let's say that maybe I can put this on this particular code first. So let's say that we have the same function diff is valid, and we are going to pass is a string. So I'm using PyCharm to explain this code to you, and also we can understand this better in the debugger mode. So that's why. So is define is valid, and the input parameter is going to be yes, which is a string that has this parenthesis. So here I'm going to say that I'm creating a variable called as stack, and we will also create a mapping dictionary as I said. So we have this mapping underscore dictionary, which is equal to let's say the key should be the closing parenthesis, and the value should be the opening parenthesis. Okay, similarly for like other square brackets and curly brackets and so on. So next, let's say that we have these curly brackets. So again, the closing brackets or parenthesis should be the key, and the opening thing should be your value. So look closely how I am creating this dictionary, and then we have this square bracket, right? So closing goes here, and opening comes here. Sorry. So opening brackets comes here, right? So this is the dictionary that we are kind of taking. Again, as I said, we will be using this stack in order to track you know, what's the final or what's the first opening bracket that we got. right? And we will use this mapping dictionary to map this corresponding parenthesis type to that particular parenthesis type and so on. So let's say that this should be mapped to this one, and this uh, closing curly bracket should be corresponding to this one, and so on. So I'll copy this and I'll put this in this markdown file to explain it to you. So we have this mapping dictionary, right? So now what we will do is, let's say that we have been given a string called as let's say this particular string. So once I have this string, what I'll do is I'll check, I'll basically iterate through each of these elements. So let's say that the first element is this one, right? So let me call this as parenthesis, this as square brackets, and this is curly brackets. I mean, not sure if you kind of represent it with a different name, but let's call this as parenthesis, the first pair. So let's say that we are taking the first element. So first we will check if this first element is present in this particular dictionary. Now, when you say, let's say if this particular element is present, if this is in mapping dictionary, this is going to give you false, because when you do this, when you check something in a dictionary, it won't check in the values, but it will check only in the keys. If you want to check in the values, you have to explicitly mention that, but when you just check it, it will kind of check if it's in the keys of the dictionary. So we know that the keys only contains the closing bracket types, right? But this is a opening thing, so it's not present here. So what I'll do now is, if this particular thing is not present here, or in other words, I will just stack the opening bracket types to the stack variable. So I'll say that stack is equal to append this if this is not present here. So your stack will become something like this. This is my opening thing, right? So this is how your stack will be. Now what I'll do is, then in the next iteration, we would have this, right? So this closing brackets will come, and now you again check if this closing bracket is present in this mapping dictionary. So we would know that yes, of course it's present because it's a closing bracket. Now you take the value of this particular key. The value of this closing bracket is this one, right? So I will take this and compare it with the last element of the stack. So basically I'm comparing the value of this particular key, the closing bracket, with the top element that's present in the stack. So in this case, both will match, and now I'll say that this is matching. So similarly, I'll do the same thing for all these bracket types until like it's a valid one. If it's not like valid, if it's not matching, then we are going to return false. So this is like the very high level overview, but again, it will make like more sense to you once we have this in the code and once we run it on debugger. Okay, so let's see how we can implement this in Python. So it's just like we are going to track the opening brackets in the stack, map it using the mapping dictionary, and just iterate it through the for loop, iterate this string through the for loop. So now I'll say for character in yes, so we are iterating through the string yes, and if this car in the mapping dictionary. So the basic or the main idea to do this particular step is to add all your opening brackets to your stack variable. Okay, so let's say if character in mapping dictionary, I'm going to, let's say top element is equal to stack.pop if stack. So I'll explain you what's the purpose of this code, just hang in there. So top element is equal to stack.pop if stack, else I'm going to say it's a hash. And the next step is if mapping dictionary of character is not equal to the top element, in that case I'm going to return false. So this particular code runs when we are not finding like a proper order of the closing brackets. Next I'm going to say else stack.append character, and finally I'm going to say return not stack, right? So this is the complete code, and we can again check this with like a particular example. So let's say we call this output as op, and let's call this as valid function, and let's pass the string that they have given here. Okay, so yep, and then I can print this output to check we are getting true or false. Print OP. So first let's run this and then I'll explain you the code line by line. Let's run this. So it says true because this is a valid case, right? So here what I'll do is I'll just change this curly brackets to this square bracket thing. So now it should return a false. Let's see if this is working. This is returning a false, right? And I'll again take the example that they have given, which is this parenthesis thing. It should return a true, but the other example is this one. This should return a false. So we can see that our code is working. So now let's try to understand what exactly is kind of happening here. Okay. So we have a stack where we are going to stack the elements. Again, this is a list, an empty list, but we are going to use it as a stack. And when I say stack, it's like we are going to add element one top of the other. We are not going to insert it. We are not going to add element in the stack. So we are always going to add element at last, or you can think about it as like adding the element in the top, just like this one. So similarly, we are going to kind of add the element on top, and then we are going to pop it out. Pop it out means like we are going to take the first element. I mean, when I say first element, just think about the top element or the last element. So I'm not meaning this A as the top element or the first element. So the C is what I'm mentioning, right? So we have this stack data structure that we are creating, and then we have this mapping dictionary where the keys are the closing brackets. This is like the very vital thing here, and your value is your opening brackets thing. And now we are iterating it over the string yes. If character in mapping dictionary, let's think about this. So we iterate this through the string, and the first letter of this string is this opening parenthesis. Now if you check this opening parenthesis is not in this dictionary, because as I said, when you check it in the dictionary, it's not going to check in the values, it's going to check in the key, and the opening brackets are not present in the key. So this condition will basically return a false, and your if condition won't run at all. This particular piece of code won't run at all when the first element is kind of being taken in this for loop. So it will go into the else condition, and we will add this to the stack. So I'm calling this stack and appending this character, which is my opening bracket. Now I have this in the stack, and in the next iteration I'm going to take this particular element, the second element, which is my closing parenthesis. Now again I'm checking if this closing parenthesis is in the mapping dictionary. Again it will check in the key, and it will return a true because we know that closing brackets or the parentheses are present in the dictionary. Now this if condition code will run. So what we are basically doing here is we are popping out the element that we have saved already. So top element is equal to stack.pop. Now the stack is not empty. This as the first element, which is this opening bracket, right? So we kind of pop it out. Pop it out means like we are taking it out of the stack. So we are deleting it in the stack and taking it and storing it in the top element. If stack else hash. Now what this means is we do this only when there is something in the stack, right? If the stack is empty, now we don't have anything to pop, right? So basically if there is something, if there is, let's say, at least one element in the stack, I'm going to pop it out. If there is no element in the stack, if it's still an empty list, I'm going to take hash as the value for my top element. So this is how we are mapping this, or this is how we are basically tracking it. So when you have this particular order, so this process goes synchronously, and we would kind of add this opening brackets in the stack, and then we would compare this with the closing bracket in the mapping dictionary, and this process goes on. But when you don't see kind of proper order, in those cases hash will be added to that particular top element, and then we compare the top element with the key of this closing bracket. So let's consider that we have this opening bracket in this stack. Let's come to this hash later. So you have this opening bracket and you're popping out. So now your stack is empty, and your top element will be this particular first letter, which is your opening parenthesis, right? Now we go into this particular if condition. If mapping dictionary of char is your second element, which is this closing thing, so we put that here and we get this value out of it. So when you call mapping dictionary of character or mapping dictionary of closing parenthesis, we will return this one. And now we check if this is not equal to top element. So here your top element will be, as I said, the one that we have stored here. So basically we are comparing the two opening brackets, and it will return a true. Then this return statement won't run, and we again go into the for loop and do the same thing again. If we are not finding that match, if the top element is not the same thing as we are seeing here, then we are going to return saying false, that it's not following a proper order. So this is how this code works in the for loop, where at each time we are saving the opening brackets or the opening parenthesis to the stack variable and comparing it with the value that we get from the corresponding closing brackets. So this is how it works. Again, if you still are a bit doubtful about this, now let's put this in a debugger and understand like what's the value each of this variable is taking, and that would like make more sense. So I'll put this on the debugger mode, and I'll put a breakpoint here so that my code will stop here. So I can just click on this serial number, it will put a red dot and highlight this, and your code execution will stop here. So stop before executing this line. So click this bug symbol, which is the debugger thing, and it has stopped here. So you can see the values here, the value of each variable, and you can also see the values here as well. So we have this yes, which is the string that we are passing, and then we have the stack, which is an empty list for now, and then we have a mapping dictionary. So here you can use this step into my code to run each line one after the other, and we can see how the variable is changing as well. So it's waiting to execute this for loop line. So I'll run this. So now we don't have char variable yet. So when I run this, we will get this char variable, and the char variable takes the first element of this string, which is the opening parenthesis, as you can see. So now we are checking if character or char variable is in mapping dictionary. Now, as I said, it's not in the mapping dictionary because it's not in the values, right? So it will just check in this key part, and we know that opening characters, opening parentheses are not in the key, so this if condition won't run. So we go into the else condition and we stack it up. So we are going to add it to this stack variable. So I'll run this. So for now the stack is an empty list, right? So when I run this one, it's going to add this character. Okay, so now let's run this again. So your character is opening parenthesis, the first element. So let's run this again. Now it's going to change to the second element of the string that we are passing, which is this closing parenthesis. So it's taking that value. So now we are checking if this closing parenthesis is present in the mapping dictionary, and we know that of course it's present. So this if condition code will run. So look closely, it's kind of executing this 8, 9, 10 line before it was like not going into those steps, right? So we have this top element is equal to stack.pop if stack else hash. So if stack has some value, in this case it does have some value, which is my opening parenthesis, so it's going to pop it out. It's going to remove it from this stack list, and it's going to save it in the variable called as top element. If it's empty, it would have saved an hash to it, right? So let's run this. Look at this stack variable. So it's going to remove it, and the top element will get this value. As you can see, stack is empty now, and top element has got this value. Now we are checking if this mapping dictionary of character. So when you put char value is closing bracket. So when you put mapping dictionary of closing bracket, this is the mapping dictionary. So when we put this as the key, so we would get this as the value. So here we are comparing this particular value of the dictionary to the top element, where your top element is the opening bracket. So basically both of these are same, right? So this top element and the value that we are going to get. So if that's the case, if this mapping dictionary of character is not equal to top element, if these two are different, then that means we are not following a proper order in the parenthesis. I'm going to say it's a false, so it's not following a proper order. But again, this is not the case, right? So here the condition is not satisfied. So here the condition is mapping dictionary char is not equal to top element, but in this case it's actually equal to the top element. So we won't go into this line number 10. So when I run this step into my code, it's going to go again to the for loop without going into this return false. So again, this step continues. In the next step, when I run this, we have this character as the next element, which is closing the square bracket, opening square bracket. Again, it won't go into this if condition because opening brackets are not allowed in the dictionary's key. So it's going to add it to the stack, and now your stack would have square bracket, and this process goes on. And in the next step, we will check with the character as closing bracket, do the same thing, and this steps like goes on, right? And we check it at each step, and finally we would return this not stack. Again, Once all these are done, once we validate like all the characters, we finally return this. So think about this, return not stack. uh, Again, this is just like a quick way to return true or false. When you say return not stack, this will return true if this is empty. So I'll explain you this in another code so that like it's more clear. So let's name this as check2. So let's say that a is equal to empty. So here I'm going to say b is equal to, I'm not sure if I can do, but let's see. So if print not a, not sure if this works, but yeah, we can check. So this is an empty list, right? Empty list will basically return a false when you kind of combine it with uh, this not character thing. So here when I say not a, uh, it will return true if it's empty, as in this case, right? But let's say that we have something in this list. Let's say we have 1 2 3. When I say not a, this as some value, now this will return a false, right? So it's basically like when you put return statement with an empty list with not a, it's going to return true. If there is something, then it's going to say not a. I hope this is clear, but this is a basic thing, so I'm not like spending much time. Just remember this. So you have an empty list, and when you put a not empty list, that means it's going to return true. Think about this empty list as false, okay? And it's like putting not and false, and you're going to get true. So that's the idea. So that's the same thing that we are doing here. Return not stack. So if all the things are like happening properly, that means we are properly popping out all the elements in the stack. So your stack is going to be empty, and when I say not stack, it's going to return true. But if the order is not proper, then your stack is going to contain the element ash. And when you, as I said, like let's say that we have this ash in our list. Okay, let's put this in a string. So we have this ash in our list, and when you take not of that particular list, it's going to say false. So that's what happens. So basically this ash will be added whenever we are not following like proper order of our parentheses, and if it's present, then we are going to return a false. So this is how this would work. And I can again take this particular example of parentheses and this, like, not following a proper order, and let's see how this stack is changing. Again, running this on debugger, right? So let's step into the code. So first element will be added. So next, let's check the closing brackets. So top element is equal to stack.pop if stack, else ash. Okay, so now it's not. Okay, let me read on this. This is not taking this ash because the stack is itself, it's not empty, right? So that's why maybe I think we have to check it with a different example. So let's take this. Okay, I think that ash should be a placeholder, but let's check. Let me take another example. I think first it should be closing bracket. So let's say that we have two opening brackets, one closing square bracket, and then we have let's say something like this. Not sure if this would put ash in there, but we can check. So basically it puts that ash if stack is kind of empty. Let's see. I'm not getting it, but yeah, that's the case. So whenever your stack is empty, then in that case we are going to use this ash as the placeholder. But again, I hope you get this idea. So this is the code in order to check if we can kind of validate if a string has like proper order of parentheses. Let's put this in LeetCode and see if this solution works. Okay, let's run this. So I'm pasting the code. So first we would validate with the test cases. I think there would be like 3 test cases with the ones that we have over here. Okay, I have to submit. So I'll run this. Invalid string. Okay, I put a minus sign here. Let's run this again. So our test cases are approved, so we can check it here, and now we can submit our code in order to validate it with like other test cases, and then we can submit and see like how fast and how memory consuming our code is. So here it's like 37 milliseconds and memory is like a bit good, and you can also work on improving this code as well. So that's it from my side, and I hope that you are clear with this particular code that we have worked on. So I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.